Well, welcome everyone. We're very excited to be with you again for the 6th annual IBM I Market Survey Results Revealed webinar. I'm Tom Huntington. I'll be your host for this 2020 kickoff event. You know, I keep calling it the year of vision, but that's maybe a little too corny as a result. Okay, yeah, we've
No,
got a
I
few
like it.
laughs with
I
that.
like it.
You like it? Okay, very good, very good. It's the
I
year
don't
of
have
vision, right?
2020 vision. No, it's not mine.
Yeah. All right. So this year we had over 500 people again fill out the survey. I hope you're not getting tired of it because we'll continue to do this here at HelpSystems, and it's been great for the market and great for IBM, the business partners, and customers that might be on the fence. So let's get started. We got a great lineup with us here this year. We are recording this event, so you'll be able to play it back at a later point. And just got a notice from my marketing team that the PDF version of the survey results is available on our website. Free download, it's ungated, so you don't have to fill anything out. Just take the information, enjoy it, share it with your team, share it with your colleagues, even your kids, so that they can learn about what IBM I is all about. First of all, one of our first guests, Alison Butterill. Alison, how are you today, and what do you do for IBM?
I'm fine, thank you very much. What I do for IBM, I am the offering manager for IBM I, which means I am in charge of the IBM I product for IBM. I work very closely with the development team, so Steve Will, the chief architect, and I meet regularly to talk about future direction, strategy, and I work with the rest of IBM to make sure that our offerings are in line with what we're doing across the board at IBM. So that's my job.
Thank you, Alison, for joining us again. And Mr. Ian Jarman down in Rochester, Minnesota. Ian, how are you today?
Very good, Tom. And let me introduce myself. I'm part of the lab services team at IBM. And obviously, I have a long history in IBM I and very glad to be working with you today.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us again. Alison, Ian, and Timothy Prickett Morgan have been with us for all 6 years. A new person with us today is Brandon Pedersen. Brandon, how are you today?
Hey, Tom, I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on. So as Tom said, my name is Brandon Pedersen. I'm the worldwide product marketing manager for IBM I, meaning I own and execute all marketing activities around IBM I and the platform.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us, Brandon. And then finally, we have Timothy Prickett Morgan. Timothy, how are you today, and what do you do for this market?
I'm good. I watch and I talk, and I've been doing it for a long time. I'm the co-editor along with Alex Woody of the 400. Yes, we still have that name. It's trademarked. I tried other ones. I couldn't get them trademarked. Forgive me. But at any rate, I follow this market as well as others. And, I'm here not only to talk about this market, but sometimes infuse a little insight from outside of this market, because there are technologies that get absorbed from other places eventually in the platform.
Yeah, and it goes without saying, I have to mention the late great Dan Berger, who was part of your team, kind of inspired us, HelpSystems, myself, to put together this marketplace study 6 years ago. So hats off to the IT jungle and helping to participate with this. And then finally, I'm Tom Huntington, EVP of Technical Solutions at HelpSystems. And I'm also an IBM Power Champion, which is a great program that Brandon, Alison, Ian, and others at IBM helped to sponsor, and very excited to be part of that, and again, a member for the 2020 season. Well, let's get started with our agenda today. Fairly short agenda. Demographics, we'll cover that. The data center, we'll spend quite a bit of time in there, talk about IT initiatives around the platform, the outlook for IBM I as we look into that crystal ball into the future, and then HelpSystems, just a little bit about us at the end here. I always like to remind people, this is not a stagnant platform. There are things going on all the time around it. And in 2019, we saw a lot of that. We saw IBM talk about the Power Server for the cloud in February, the 7.4 announcements in April, and then delivery of those on schedule in June. And of course, some new TRs for 7.3 also to come along with that. And then we were talking about the different education opportunities, Common North America, Common Europe. And then in June, IBM with the delivery of 7.4, the new Power HA features, the TLS security, the DB2 Mirror for I, and definitely some application development enhancements and SQL, things like that. And then, our IT Jungle already starting to talk about the next power server chip processor, whatever you want to call it, Power 10 is being worked on. So that future is out there. And then of course we get involved with more cloud activity with Microsoft, SkyTap, talking about bringing power to the Azure cloud infrastructure. And then IBM I announces end of life of one of our operating systems, 7.2. Not to fear, it is out there a little bit yet, but effective in 2021. IBM Tech U events again in the fall, and they will be again there this year. And then of course, some new TRs for 7.4 already and 7.3 in November. And then of course, to go along with the theme of it's a vibrant platform, new fresh faces that Brandon Pedersen has been part of and helping to bring to the program. So let's start with our first polling question. We want to know a bit more about your experience with the platform. So we'll launch up this polling question. We'll see what our audience has for IBM I, AS400, should I say System 3836 background. And we might even have some newbies with us today. So you kind of fit into that 2008 to present. Isn't it hard to believe that the IBM I name has been around now since 2008? And if I do my math correctly, Timothy, I think that's like 11 years or something like that.
Yes, 12-ish.
12-ish.
12.
So
Right. This is Alison.
Yeah.
In June of this year, it will have been called IBM I longer than it's been called any other name. So we are not entertaining any more usage of old names. The longest one has been IBM I.
Okay.
As long as you're not entertaining a use of a new name, we're good.
No.
You beat me to the punch on that, Tim. All right, we heard it here. There is no new name change.
Good.
At least not under Alison's watch, right?
Thank you.
Very good. All right, looks like we gave you enough time to answer that polling question. Let's see what, let's see, I want to share those results out. So, looks like 41% of you, that's the big number with the AS400 era, which kind of be expected. 31% with prior System 3036, I-Series 12%, and IBM I, the newer people, starting with the platform then. So, all right, thank you for answering that first polling question. Let's move on and talk a little bit about demographics. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time in this space, but just to kind of remind people about the numbers. Again, we had over 500 people fill this out for the 6th year. And yes, many times the same people too, but again, getting a feel for the market. And we had 52% North America with Canada and USA having a big bulk, but then look at the rest of the world, 27% in Europe and then other parts of the world. Also, just to remind you, this is not just a small organization survey or a medium-sized organization survey. As you look at the number of employees in the various organizations that filled out the survey, a very big breadth. And that's kind of the story around this platform. It is very prevalent in many different size organizations and industries. Right, Alison? What do you think about that?
Oh, absolutely. So I think, as in previous years, manufacturing leads the way. I do believe that was our initial thrust of what we took to market when we introduced IBM I back in 1988. And manufacturing, we used to sell from IBM the MAPEX package and DMAS packages. So manufacturing distribution has always been a huge percentage of our clients. What I'm really interested in is how banking and finance is moving into taking over that space. Banking and finance, we know, is one of our most fastest growing industry segments, along with retail. So I'm not surprised at all. And then following closely behind retail, insurance, and healthcare with the incredible security of your data on IBM I, it's not surprising to me that people who have to protect personal data and follow all of the regulations around personal data, and that would cover, banking, finance, retail, insurance. These are growing areas of our business. We still have a huge base in manufacturing and distribution, but the others are growing into that as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Alison. Brandon, I know you do a lot of success stories around the IBM I platform. What's your experience been there with the different industries?
Yeah, so it's great to see a diversity of industries who are trusting their business on IBM I. If you haven't already, I definitely encourage everybody to go out to our customer story page. Just Google IBM I customer stories, you'll find it. And we have a customer story for just about every one of these industries, and they're all innovative. We have a bank who has connected their IBM I data to Watson in the IBM Cloud to develop a mobile credit scoring application for their sales team to give customers an immediate decision on credit approval. We have warehouses who have completely automated their entire operation with robots running on IBM I, and I can go on and on and on. So definitely go check out our customer story page, and you can find a story in your industry as well.
Thank you, Brandon. All right, let's move on and talk about staffing around us. And Alison, we'll pick on you again. And any thoughts on the IBM I staffing numbers?
The administrator side, I think that's fairly consistent from last year. We have lots of companies that have, thanks, Tom. We have lots of companies that have one administrator. That's fairly consistent. I think where I'm always encouraged is the number of developers. As you know, my background was originally in the development tools and languages, and there was always a misconception, I think, that IBM I companies just took a package, a business application package off the shelf and put it on their machine. And we know that's not really the case. We know that many of our companies hire developers specifically to tailor those packages and to make them unique to the business. And this just reflects that there's a higher percentage of companies that have developers in-house or hired on contract than many people would have expected. So it validates what we've always thought. I like that.
Yeah, and there's still a lot of development going on IBM I, which is great to see. All right, let's move ahead and talk about what's in the data center around IBM I. And Timothy, we're gonna turn it over to you and have you take a crack at what you think about power servers and partitions.
I think the number of machines is interesting in that there's a large portion of the base that has two. And if you kind of take both of these charts in at the same time, you'll see that a lot of people have multiple partitions. Historically, we would have had a test and development machine and a production machine. You wouldn't want to mix those two. But I think it's probably fair to say that a lot of companies have test dev in our partition on the primary machine, and the second machines are probably used for disaster recovery and high availability. As for the multiple machines, there's, 31 plus machines, that's a lot of machines. But there are data sovereignty issues. People like to have compute local for retail and other distribution operations sometimes. So I'm not surprised by that, but I think the tendency would be to try to have as few machines as possible and use as many partitions as possible. And we see this balance changing over time. We can see a slight increase in partitions over time. That's to be expected. So I'm just glad people are using the partitioning, that they have multiple machines. It's not everybody pouring everything into one basket. I don't think that's sane. So that's my
awesome. Thought. Okay, thank you. And then Ian, what are your thoughts in addition to that?
Well, since we talked about anniversaries, we introduced LPAR or partitioning on the AS400 actually 20 years ago. So it's really interesting to see how this has grown over time. It's become obviously a ubiquitous technology with almost everybody running multiple partitions, with the possible exception of very small systems. So this is a great trend for us. And, Power VM is one of the great differentiators of the platform, not only the flexibility, but the efficiency. And so, yeah, I agree with Tim that you don't want to have everything in one basket, but people certainly are very actively using this technology today.
Very true. And then you add in the built-in work management, and you got an environment where you can really scale out or scale up and had some really big workloads, and that's what we see around the platform a lot.
Yeah. So a suggestion for next year.
Okay.
You want to say how many machines do you have on site and how many instances are you running in the cloud, because that's what people are doing now, and we want to start tracking that. I'm just
Awesome.
thinking of this now. I'm not trying to torpedo you. I just thought of it.
All right. Well, that's the
I don't
beauty of
want
a
to
live
forget.
event. Okay. So Ian, what about staying current in the data center? What are your thoughts on that and what people are doing
Well,
with the operating system?
when I look at this chart, this is a thing of great beauty. Okay, this is exactly what you would want to see with a very active platform, introducing new releases, and people moving with you over time. So if you look at 2020 now, obviously we've only this survey was taken at the end of 2019, so there's only 4% on the very latest 7.4 release. But what you see in this 5-year view is people moving with us as we introduce those new releases. That tells you that it's very easy to move from release to release. And it's exactly what you would want in this sort of active marketplace today. So it's a great story. And I thank everybody out there who's listening who is installing these later releases to take advantage of the new function that we're delivering.
Absolutely. And Tim, any thoughts on this slide with you?
Yeah, I agree with with Ian. The curve is exactly what you'd want to see. I will remind everybody that this week is when Microsoft shot Windows 2008 in the head, and something like 28% of the server base worldwide is still using that platform.
Wow.
So
That's
that's a big percentage.
it is.
Not
That's
of the Windows
and a
server
great
base,
insight.
of the
Yeah.
server base.
Yeah. When you
So
think about just the security vulnerability of having old servers like that around, whereas it's with this marketplace, it's so easy to stay current, and your executives have to be thinking about that. Potential impact is it's not about getting breached as much as it is about having downtime
well, I'm
because of
sorry, that
security
to be really
problems.
precise, that data is from the end of 2018, so it might have gone down, but it was 40% of Windows servers, 28% of worldwide servers, and that's, we're not anything like that. Now, having said all that, I will remind everybody that I think that the people that stay current on operating systems are the same people that read newsletters, that are the same people that take part in surveys. I still think there's a larger percentage of some of the older stuff than this shows. But the general shape of the curve for people that tend to stay active, this is actually, this fits perfectly. And you could predict what 2021 is going to look like from this data set and be
Awesome.
within a couple of points.
Hmm. Well, let's move our attention to the overall server itself, the power server. And Alison, what do these results mean for the IBM I market?
Well, very similar to what Ian and Tim were talking about with the operating system. I mean, this is a curve, this is a trend that is really exciting because it does put people or indicates that people are concerned about keeping current and moving to the latest technology. So quite happy to see that swing towards Power 9 and growth in that area. And of course, with Power 8 is staying current as well. But I'm really liking seeing the older versions move forward. There are so many things that we address in Power 9, including performance, but security and other things that we address with Power 9 that we did not do back when we didn't know they existed in earlier versions of Power. So this trend is really exciting to me.
Awesome. Tim, any thoughts on this one? I know you love the hardware. You said you wanted to talk about hardware. Let's hear it.
On this one, I would say that historically, if you look at how Power 8 did, Power 9's not doing quite as well, but there's a reason for that. Power 8 is enough performance for a lot of people. It's a very powerful processor, and we have companies that certainly have very large workloads. They buy lots of big iron, but that's a percentage of the base. It's a large percentage of the revenue that comes from the system, but it's not a large percentage of the base. So, I'm not surprised. I don't think it's a bad indication about Power 9. It's just, hey, if Power 8's working and you can run a relatively recent release on it, why would you buy Power 9 if you've just bought Power 8? I would think that people would skip generations at some point, and I think plenty of companies are going to wait for Power 10 to come out in 2021. And we'll talk about this in the next slide, so I'm going to be quiet now. Go ahead.
All right. Well, let's turn it over to, all right, let's talk about that. You know, the 2019, 2020 plans for hardware upgrades. Brandon, what are your thoughts on this slide?
Yeah, I think it's great to see that a lot of the community is planning to upgrade both their hardware and software. For the 39% who answered no, definitely encourage you to upgrade to the latest and greatest. You know, IBM I 7.4 on Power 9, take advantage of a lot of capabilities we've built into the platform, like DB2 Mirror, for example, for continuous availability for your business. Power 9, obviously, better price performance than our past hardware. So we'll definitely get on the latest and greatest to improve your business.
And Tim, again, getting back to the upgrade for 2020, what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I think that you've got, if you add the hardware only and the both together, you get 35% of the base is going to buy hardware this year. That's an unusually high number. I think that the tendency has been to do an upgrade every 3 or 4 and sometimes 5 years for this base, for the reasons I just said. You know, you in the old days, you know, we crank the clock 20% and people were dying for more performance. Now we have so much performance for compared to the workloads that many customers have that they're not dying for it the same way. Some are, yes, but it's not everybody in the base. So I'm surprised that number's that high, and I wonder if intent is going to work out to be the same thing as action. We see this all the time. People say, yeah, we're going to do it, and then they're like, well, we can wait another year. So we'll see how it plays out. But the intent is a good thing that it's that high. It's higher than you would expect based on the historical trends of upgrades. So we'll see how it plays out.
You know, and I think you hit on it earlier about the hurdles. The hurdles with the Power Platform for the IBM I customer is more of a commercial hurdle than it is actually an IT issue, because the upgrade process is, you know, really kind of down to a science on this platform.
Yeah, I mean, you could fire up another core, you know, it's not a big deal on the machines that have them, or you could buy another processor card on some of these machines, or you can take a processor card and swap it from a single processor card machine to a dual processor machine. There's all kinds of things you can do to add capacity. So when we look at this, you know, do you have planes to, and the word upgrade is key. An upgrade doesn't mean a brand new system necessarily. It might mean turning on inactive cores. It might mean all these other things. So, you know, precision in language is important for this, but people clearly can do things without going all the way to getting a new serial number or upgrading an existing serial number.
Very true. All right. Let's move on and talk about other operating systems around IBM I. They are definitely there. And Ian, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, so first of all, I mean, we've noted over time in this survey the growth of Linux, you know, around IBM I, and specifically compared to Windows. So that Linux number you're pointing out there on x86 has been going up over time. Of course, the big thing that's happened in the past year, since we last talked you know, about this survey, is IBM's acquisition of Red Hat. So this is really exciting. And we've been working with Red Hat for 20 years, but now we've acquired Red Hat, we're obviously going to be working even more closely than ever before. So I think we can expect a lot more action in this area, specifically in the area of hybrid multi-cloud with Linux servers running Red Hat, running OpenShift, closely aligning with IBM I and AIX servers. So this is really exciting for IBM to be bringing Red Hat into the team. Obviously, Red Hat are still going to be an independent organization within IBM, largely because they want to preserve their independent partnerships with other vendors. But from a strategy point of view inside IBM, you know, we're getting behind OpenShift, behind Red Hat, and behind optimizing our software through cloud packs that are specifically designed to run on Red Hat itself. So there's going to be a lot of new action in this area, and I don't hear anywhere people saying what I want is Windows. I hear a lot of people moving to Linux, but I don't hear a lot of people aspiring to move to Windows. So I think it's out there. I don't think Windows is going away. but I don't think people trust Windows in the way that they trust certainly IBM I and some of our other platforms.
Very good. Tim, what are your thoughts on this, on these results and what's happening with servers alongside IBM I?
I think in general, we should expect Linux to be half of the operating systems outside of IBM I, or outside of the Power platform, let's say it that way, and Windows to go down to be maybe half at some point in the coming years. That's a trend that I expect, because if you look at the operating systems that are running on the Azure cloud, it's already 50-50, and that's on Microsoft's own cloud, and it's been that way for a while. So, that's the first thing. All new applications that are interesting, and particularly open source applications, data analytics, machine learning, those kinds of things, they are coded for Linux. They might be ported to Windows, but that's the primary operating system that the new interesting things get put on. And the good news is with the Red Hat acquisition, you can get a commercial Linux supported. You can get OpenStack, you can get OpenShift, you can do other things. You have a container environment, you can run machine learning algorithms and frameworks on top of those partitions, and they can be on the exact same machine that you're running IBM I. You can use Power VM and carve it up. You can keep it on separate servers if you want. I would make an argument about that you should just fire up some more cores and get the data in the transactional system so it's accessible by those frameworks over the memory bus. Why on earth would you want to do it over, a complicated set of clusters that are remote? There's no reason to do that. So I would like to see that the pairing of Red Hat and IBM I be very tight, and us to start bringing to market a true hybrid system and really integrate Red Hat for realsies, not side by side, but really, make it almost like the new pace, and have it so that it's easy for IBM I shops to absorb these new technologies. Because if you do that, you're going to sell more iron. They're going to fire up more cores. It's just so much easier, and it lets the IBM I guys pull more workload onto the box. I really want that to happen. So I don't know how it happens, but that's my goal for IBM.
Yes, interesting perspective on that. Thank you, Timothy. All right, let's move ahead and talk about capacity plan concerns on power. And we asked this question because we know many of you are thinking about upgrading, and about 50% of you have some issue with the process. And we're hoping that you'll take a look at what we do, and we can provide and help you with capacity plans, or you can work through your business partners around the globe, and even IBM Tech Line to help you out as you are going through this upgrade process to make sure that you have the right size system. So take another look at what we do at HelpSystems. We do have capacity planning capabilities, and we can do that not only for IBM I, but we can do that for AIX, Linux, and Windows with the Performance Navigator products. So we can take information from, AIX, Linux, and IBM I. I think I said Windows. I had that in my mind. But anything power we can help you out with, and really, really excited to be able to help you that solution. Ian, as we look at the SAN storage that started cropping up with power not too many years ago, what are your thoughts on this market around IBM I?
Yeah, I mean, this has been a 10-year long transition. If you go back 10 years, it was closer to 100% that we had, maybe a little further back, but it used to be about 100% of people were running internal storage. 5 years ago, that was 75%, and now we're in the 50% range. So obviously the trend is towards external storage, and the trend there is to leverage new and consistent storage technologies, not least of which the software technologies, because these have flash copy, these have integration with Power HA, and so on. So I think this trend will continue, but I think there's going to be some big shakeups here as NVMe comes available, and so you're going to see a lot of changes in the core storage technologies as we switch to those newer technologies coming down the line. But the trend is clear, and I think people are going to continue to look for how they can share their storage with other platforms, and certainly anybody running AIX and IBM I together is likely to be using one of these external storage devices.
Awesome. And Tim, I know you have some industry insight around this technology too, in NVMe. What do you have there?
So as Ian was saying, the lines are going to blur, I think. A SAN is a collection of storage that's got shared volumes and LUNs on it that has fiber channel networking into the servers that link into it. It was a great way to consolidate storage and try to lower the overall cost of storage across a pool of servers that may have been working together or not. So when you start talking about NVM Express Flash and NVM Express over Fabrics interconnects, now you can start pooling the storage if it's flash or any persistent media in the long run. If it's located in individual servers, you can pool it and it looks like it's local to everybody else, and there's no server has any kind of degradation in latency. It's almost like it was all direct attached storage. If you take a pool of storage servers that are loaded with flash and use NVM Express over Fabrics to connect into it, you've created a modern SAN. So what's the difference, right? So anything can talk to anything with very little latency. So then it becomes, well, what form factors do you want to do? How do you want to consolidate this stuff? But the storage, the difference between internal, external, shared and not shared starts disappearing. And I think that for very, very small servers, very, very small shops, I don't think that number is going to go down, but and it'll be a good indicator of how many small shops can still get by with disk drives and maybe a flash accelerator, one NVM drive in the unit. I don't know. So I don't know what that number is. Ian and Alison probably know better than me, but I don't think this can go to zero, is my point.
Yeah, I agree. And there's always going to be a very good reason for smaller machines to have integrated storage, because that's the great advantage actually of IBM I in that market space. So if you have a single machine, if you've got integrated storage, that's a fine thing to do, particularly if you accelerate that with one of these latest technologies. So yeah, there's always going to be a role for that, and that's going to be there forever, I think.
Awesome. All right. Well, we've heard a lot about power in the cloud, IBM I in the cloud. Alison, what are your thoughts on where people are going to run their IBM I infrastructure?
I guess the good news is they can run it wherever they like. They can run it on-prem, they can run it in the cloud, they can run it as a split between the two. Certainly, I think that anybody considering upgrading, considering looking at new applications should be doing an investigation about what's available in the cloud. It certainly is the way businesses are reviewing where applications should reside. And I think that many companies are moving some or all of their workload to the cloud, but only where and when it makes business sense. And I think that's the key. It's really difficult sometimes to get past the cloud, and really sort of look at what makes the most business sense. If what you're doing is, with your highly critical business data, where you're protecting security and so on, maybe leaving the data on-prem is the right answer. Maybe running some of the analytics against that data or retrieving additional data from the cloud is the answer. It really has to do individually with the industry, with the company, and with the specific application.
Right. And if you're interested in this topic, I did do a webinar in December on IBM I in the cloud. So go out to our website. It's out there. It's recorded. We had some great guests from SkyTap, from Meridian IT, and from IBM themselves talking about why and the pros and cons and all those kinds of things. So it's really a good session you might want to listen to. All right. Let's talk about high availability. Ian, back over to you.
Yeah, so it looks, again, this trend is ongoing, and a lot of people have some kind of high availability solution, whilst there's still a lot of people preferring other solutions, including recovery from tape. So I think that the big thing that's happening this year, of course, is, since we did the webcast last year, the introduction of 7.4 and DB2 Mirror. So just to be clear, this isn't going to change this picture so much, because DB2 Mirror is really for people who already have a high availability solution or disaster recovery solution and are adding above that a continuous availability solution in a data center, because DB2 Mirror is focused on a data center solution where the systems are very close together. So even if you have DB2 Mirror in the future, you're also going to have a DR solution or an HA solution on another site, including Power HA or some other software solution. Nonetheless, DB2 Mirror is the big thing that's happened, and it's a fantastic new technology, and there's great excitement about it. So Alison and I are working very closely with our IBM and business partner teams and the Course Lab services to help clients who are very interested in introducing this DB2 Mirror solution.
Yeah, correct. And we see opportunity still, to your point, for Power HA and software replication like Robot HA and those kinds of things. But a lot of what we're hearing too is customers wanting to go from having two on-premise kind of solutions for HA to actually doing HA in the cloud. And so I think that with all the movement in the cloud and a combination of that previous slide we talked about and high availability, that is a reality today where customers are using their HA strategy is to have DR in the cloud or HA in the cloud as close to HA as possible, but certainly not as resilient or as available as you get with DB2 Mirror. So thank you for talking about that. Let's talk about IT initiatives and move right into that topic. And over to you, Alison, to talk about what people have in their minds in the IT community around IBM I.
I sort of think of this as the list of things that keep you up at night. And I think
Okay.
I think that any IT manager, any company executive would be worried about security. That has been in the same position every year from the first time we did this survey, Tom.
Right.
And I believe that is number one concern. So as the others have mentioned previously, if we keep moving to the latest technology levels, if we move to 7.4 and on the latest of the power servers, you get the highest level of security that we can provide. And then adding in additional vendor products to supplement where necessary, I think that's really critical. But what I think is most interesting to me is these top, and I'm going to say 4 topics, have been in this same order every year from the beginning. We've always been concerned about being highly available, and I think that's becoming more and more important as we move out to cloud environments where we have a lot of companies like banks and retailers doing 24/7 availability. They can't afford to be down. They lose business when they do that. And then modernizing, we've been talking modernization since the 90s with new GUI interfaces and so on. And of course, skills continue to be a top concern. How do we replace the skills that we have today? And IBM has been doing a lot of work in this area, specifically around the academic initiative. We've ramped that up again this year in working with more young people. You saw in your list, Tom, of the things that happened last year around the IBM I community. We launched our latest Fresh Faces list of people under the age of 30 who work in IBM I environments. So we're doing a lot of work in all of those areas. Now, having said that, we're doing a lot of work across the board here, but it's interesting to me that these top 4 remain the same, and probably as it should be.
Yeah. So this is really the list that keeps you up at night, because IBM has to deliver on all of these things, whereas some of us can focus on 1, 2, 3, or 4 of these things, right? So
Very
nice.
true.
Yeah, right. So Timothy, how do you feel about this list?
Well, if we had been doing the survey in 2008 and 2009, I guarantee you that reduced IT spending would have been on the hard left.
Right.
So there's no question about that, because I saw that in every platform, everything, was the main concern during the Great Recession. So to my mind, in the data set, imaginary as well as real, reduced IT spending has been moving to the right. It started out, and when we did the survey, it was in the number 5 position. Now it's number 8, if I did 7, if I do my math right, or if I can count right. And I think it's going to continue drifting over that way as long as the economies of the world are more or less okay. I find this comforting because that means at the beginning of the year, people are fairly up, or the end of last year, they're fairly optimistic about how the new year is going to unfold. I think that migrating applications to the cloud, which is just on the other side of reducing IT spending, that's going to jump. And I would not be surprised in next year's survey if it's number 5. And artificial intelligence way over there on the right, I would not be surprised to see that move over a couple of spots too. Those are the ones, that's the movement I expect to see. I don't think anything else is going to change relative in this position. I think we'll be talking about modernizing applications 10 years from now. I think it will be right where it is now, because that's a process, not a destination. It never ends. Security is a process, not a destination. You're never done with skills. These are the things that never get finished. So I'm not surprised they're where they are.
Yeah, you know, and going back to that reduced IT spend thing, I mean, if you think about what's happened, where obviously we've just kicked off a new decade. The last decade, I think, was spending a lot of time educating the upper executives, CIOs, CEOs of organizations about what is IT and what is its impact in the business. And now it's part of the business. People no longer look at it as, well, we're a manufacturer, but who cares about IT, right? I mean, it is part of the business across all sectors, whether you're in retail or, you know, finance or whatever. And so I think that IT spend thing you used to be able to just say, oh, I want to buy this, and you get it, right, in IT. And that whole thing changed over this last decade. And I think that's a really good thing for those of us who are in IT, having accountability and more alignment with the business. And it's fun to see. And thank you all for commenting on that. So speaking of cybersecurity, as we roll into that, there's a lot of different things that we see people doing to shore up their security around IBM I, and it's interesting to see people spending money on antivirus, exit point monitoring, you know, integration of their security events with the rest of the organization. It's not just IBM I people are concerned about, but certainly Windows, Unix, and Linux. Compliance and auditing, you know, we just saw another state in the US anyways pass a new set of regulations. I think privacy is going to impact everybody going forward, and privacy of your data and your rights to your data is going to impact every organization, whether you're privately owned or you're publicly traded. It isn't really going to matter. We've also seen a lot of requests for data encryption at rest, and then data encryption for data that's in flight. So certainly those things are all available to you on IBM I, and they continue to be solutions for different issues within cybersecurity itself. Ian, what are your thoughts on cybersecurity challenges?
Yeah, well, I think, you know, of course, everybody is concerned about this in the industry, you know, including in the IBM I marketplace. So, but you know, challenges come from multiple areas, and I think that's what you see here. It's a very complex area, and I think what I'm increasingly seeing is a stronger focus in organizations on security. It is, after all, the top concern that we had a couple of charts ago. And it's not a single answer. There are many challenges across the board. And you just showed in the last chart that you know, only 50% of people have privileged management, privileged user management on the platform, which seems like something that everybody should have, given that inadvertent challenges in that area are one of the biggest, you know, security risks that you might have. So I would just encourage people to continue to talk about security, to continue to look at the different requirements for their teams, and to try to cross that barrier, as you were talking about, Tom, between IT and the business in this area, because there are some straight out IT security issues, and then there are ones that really are determined by the business users themselves. So you've got to look at both sides of this and really have a strong partnership between business and IT in the security area.
Right. You know, and I think one of the biggest things we see is just kind of that lack of security knowledge. And I
Yeah.
am going to give a shout out to two of my fellow power champions, Carol Woodbury and Robin Tatum, who happen to be part of our HelpSystems team. They are always doing free webinars, I mean, free education. And these are all recorded on our website. Take advantage of that stuff. They will educate you on what IBMI security is all about, and even other topics outside of that, and security in general, and regulations and stuff like that. So take advantage of that. And Ian, moving along with cybersecurity, what are your thoughts on the regulations that we're all having to adhere to these days?
Yeah, well, obviously we have, you know, sensitive personal information that needs to be protected on all of our systems. And depending on which industry you're in, whether that's in the healthcare industry or the finance industry, you may be working with a different regulatory authority and a different set of standards. I think, though, the thing that is changing is consumer privacy. And so GDPR, the regulations in Europe for data protection, these are being replicated, or at least similar types of regulations are coming in Latin America, in California, and I think we can continue to see that rise. So I think in the future, if you were to, you know, say GDPR or other, you know, local marketplace consumer privacy regulations, that number is going to increase dramatically over time.
Right.
And I see this day to day in my own work, because in IBM, of course, we have in our lab services team, we have a worldwide team. We have information on that team from Europe and comparing that to information from Asia. So we daily have to be aware of these types of privacy regulations. So that one's going to increase for sure. So if you haven't seen it now, which you probably have, you're probably going to encounter that very soon.
Right. And then for me, it's just look at the nun. The nun keeps going down, and it's going to continue to go down as we move forward from a security
Yeah.
standpoint. All right, moving along. I know we're getting into our time limit here a little bit. So Tim, let's have you talk about different applications running on IBMI.
Yeah, I think we have to remind ourselves of the long history of not only creating our own code for the platform, but also the historical open source nature of the early applications that were available for sale from IBM, JD Edwards, and other companies that allowed people to grab the code and heavily modify it. So it's hard to tell where the lines are here, but at some point, a heavily modified third-party package is a homegrown application because the vendor can no longer support it. So, you know, I don't know where those lines are, but clearly there's a lot of programming going on still. And that's a good thing, because that means that people are tying the platform to the business very tightly. They're not tied to SAP, they're tied to their own code and their own platform. And I love that. So yay. The other thing this chart doesn't show is that it's probably a mix of things. They have some homegrown stuff. They might go with a third-party application for certain things. So I don't know how this mixes up, but my gut tells me, you know, they do some custom stuff, and they do some third-party stuff, and it's a mix.
True, very true. Alison, what do you think about applications on I? I'm sure you spend a lot of time thinking about that.
Quite a bit, yep. Just as the industry segmentation that we looked at sort of lent towards manufacturing and distribution today, I think that is really reflected here with the applications Infor, Oracle, and so on. Those are the major manufacturing distribution applications as well. But you will see some of the banking applications now starting to make it onto your chart as a significant amount of, or a significant percentage. The one thing I would say though is about 50%, I think you said, of your respondents were from North America. I think this number would be slightly different if we had higher responses from other areas of the world. So for example, if we were to go and poll in ASEAN and look at the results of their applications for banking, we might see things like Silver Lake and MySys have a much higher percentage than some of the ones listed here. So I really think it's a geographic response, but because 50% of our respondents are from North America, it's sort of skewed that way. I just wanted to make sure everybody understood that it's not the same everywhere in the world.
All right, let's let's move on and talk about the modernization apps, and probably have to keep this one a little shorter, Allison, so we'll just have you talk to it.
Okay. Well, all I'll say is I think that this question, the way it was asked, is not binary, which means I don't have to say I do this and only this. I actually believe that green screen number is probably a reflection of I do green screen, but we also have other application interface, so web-based or graphical. And I mean, I would like to believe that because as the world has moved along, and for probably the last 15 years, we've been trying to convince clients that we need to move away from green screen. This is critical to the success of moving forward. And we're seeing different kinds of interfaces. We're seeing web, graphical, we're seeing mobile devices, all kinds of different interfaces that people are used to using. We need to move along and especially for the business applications, move to a new user interface. Maybe administration, operational side, green screen's fine, but we absolutely have to move to something more user intuitive, especially as we get new users.
Well, that's very true. So you mean this number equals more than 100%. So what that's saying is there's about 15% of the people that only have green screen, which I think is a pretty good number. Most people have a web graphical these days, and that's all good. Okay.
That's our hope.
Yeah, let's move on to development languages and have you talk about that, Allison.
I'm not surprised. We know RPG is the most popular language to be used with business applications. Millions and millions of lines of RPG code run thousands and thousands and thousands of businesses. SQL as a language is becoming more powerful and therefore more popular. And certainly for job control, CL is there. We are seeing a slight reduction in PHP, but I think if we get to the next chart, we'll talk about the fact that there is an increase in the number of open source languages in general. And so open source, if it was the category instead of PHP, I believe it would overtake some of the Java believers even more.
Right. And then speaking of open source, Brandon, what are your thoughts on the open source opportunities for people today?
Yeah, so I think this is great to see this number increasing for every option here year after year. To the 45% on the other slide that mentioned that IBM I skill is a top concern for you. I mean, this is how you address that concern. Is the new generation of software developers, this is what they know. They grow up learning Node.js, Python. Python is the most taught language in schools now, and so this is how you modernize. This is how you address the skills gap. Is integrate these new technologies onto your platform, and it can really do a lot for your business.
Absolutely, I'm amazed on how much this has grown here. So, and one of the other things people use is RDI on IBM I. And Alison, what are your thoughts of the adoption of RDI and using it to help with that skill issue?
Yeah, Rational Developer for I is the strategic development environment that we have for IBM I. I think what we're seeing is more people moving or gravitating towards using RDI, especially since the introduction a couple of years ago of our PDM view inside RDI, which helped some of the more traditional programmers who were hesitant to move to a desktop environment. It helped them in making that transition. So we're seeing more people interested in using it and getting it. I'm still a little concerned about the 40% that aren't interested in using it. Maybe they are the 40% that download applications, but or maybe some of the respondents are not programmers.
There you go. Mm-hmm. Interesting. Well, and talking about this platform too, I'm a big fan of automation and doing more with less, and we do have a great portion of this platform that is run in what I'll say unattended mode, and those are options, more of a mindset in how you run IBM I than anything. So we do see a lot of customers running the platform unattended. Let's move ahead and talk about the outlook for this platform, and over to you, Ian, to talk about how critical the platform is for its users.
Yeah, and I think we've seen this over time, that this is the the core platform for many of people's most important business applications. So this is what we've seen over time, and it speaks to the trust that people put in the platform. So I don't think this picture is going to change. And there's always people that have different parts of the business running on other platforms, but for the majority of people, IBM I remains their core go-to business operational platform. So it's the systems of record for us in our lab services team, and it's the systems of record for many of you out there. So thank you for that.
Awesome. And then, as we look at what are your plans for IBM I platform, this is always the big scary question out there for many. But Tim, what do you think about what's happening with IBM I customers?
The story's the same, and I don't think it's anything like this. There is not 9% of the base moving this coming year, or in the coming years. People say they're going to do it. They might have an intent of doing it. Even in the worst of the migration off the base in the early 2000s, it was never 10% or 9%. The base would be gone if that were the case. So, and it's not, it's clearly not. So, 1%, 2% really consider it, some do. And the migrations aren't caused by anything the platform's doing wrong, but by consolidations of businesses. You get eaten by an Oracle shop, you got to fight a battle to keep the IBM I platform in there. So it's very difficult to do, and I never believe that people are going to do it to the extent that these charts might suggest they do. And the fact that we're all talking here is testament to the fact that it doesn't really happen to that degree.
Right. And I'm going to apologize to our audience listening today. We are going to go over just a little bit. Unfortunately, we have with 5 presenters and stuff, we just end up talking a little more than we planned on, but all good content. So we're going to continue on and not rush through things too quickly. So Ian, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think I agree with Tim that, if it's you put it exactly right, Tim. If this were if these figures were correct, then we wouldn't have an install base anymore. So it does say that people are moving very carefully in this area, and there's always people considering other things and other applications come available, SAP HANA, for example. But this is a very stable, highly valued platform, so I'm not surprised that it doesn't quite move as people are predicting here.
Right.
So,
and there's also a portion of the database that's growing, and then that 9% number, we break that down because we all know that there's some that are going to move in 2 years, potentially 2 to 5 or longer. Those things just don't happen. What do you think, Tim?
Anybody who says they've got a plan for 5 years from now or more than 5 years, that's not really a plan. And that goes for somebody designing a chip, designing a system, installing an ERP package. I mean, people make long-term decisions. I'm not trying to say that. When people make an ERP decision, it's for 10 years at least, and sometimes 20. So I'm not saying people don't make long-term decisions, but there's a big difference between we got to change this and we can change this. So, and my other thought for this is that we have to stop thinking about platforms and we have to start thinking about deployment models. The platform almost doesn't matter. It's going to be a mix of things. People will have a mix of AIX and IBM I. People will have a mix of Linux and IBM I. People will have a mix of IBM I and Windows, because that's historically what they've done. But what we don't know what they're going to do, and we should start tracking, is how much of it is on-premise, how much of it's out in the cloud, and how much of it is a SaaS service where they don't even manage it anymore. And I think if anything's going to happen, people are going to add applications from SaaS, do DR in the cloud, and maybe pick a few applications in the cloud, or port some out to the cloud, and keep the very mission critical stuff on premise running on IBM I. That's my guess. But we need to start, breaking that 58% down a little bit to figure out what they're doing.
Yeah,
I think,
and Alison, what do you think? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ian.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, I agree that the software as a service is absolutely going to be an interesting thing to watch going forward. And I think people are adding point solutions as software as a service, not necessarily replacing their core applications, but they're adding applications that integrate with IBM I, and those are now available as a service in the cloud. So that's a very interesting space to watch, but doesn't mean that they're actually migrating necessarily the core from where they are today.
Awesome, thanks. And then Alison, anything to add on to this?
No, I would agree. I agree with Tim that I think as we watch this software as a service space and other cloud, that 58%, it would be very interesting on next year's survey to break that down just a little bit more. You know, it just comes to the discussion of when you say what are the plans for the IBM I platform, it comes back to a platform is both the operating system and the hardware. And so as we move to cloud, it doesn't necessarily mean we're moving away from IBM I operating system or applications, but we're moving our data center to the cloud. So we really need to have a little more information as that 58%, as we watch that 58% over the next couple of years.
That sounds good. And then Brandon, from a marketing message, return on investment, somebody's saying they're 90% happy. What does IBM marketing think about that?
Well, I love it personally. I know we all did it at IBM. IBM I is the only integrated operating system in the market. It is a great value for your business. So, yeah, this is a great number to see, 90%. I'd be interested to see why 10% of people say no, but this is a great number.
Right. And I know there's been some great reports like by IDC and stuff. What are some of those things that you've seen that are additional artifacts that are kind of supporting this?
Yeah, so we published a paper with IDC last year about IBM I and our future strategy and the role of IBM I in the business. It's out on our IBM I landing page. You can go check that out or just Google it. So I definitely encourage you to take a read through that and see what a third-party analyst has to say.
Awesome. Thanks, Brandon. Well, I want to thank all of you for joining. I apologize we went over a little bit here, but as you look at the marketplace survey, first of all, there's a PDF that's downloadable from our website. We recorded today's webinar for you to listen to again in the future. Over 500 of you filled out the survey again here in the 6th annual. Hopefully you're not getting tired of it. There will be a 7 coming up, lucky 7, I guess they say. Security still is a top concern. As we expected over time, more and more of you are running multiple partitions, taking advantage of that technology. High availability continues to climb as more of us become dependent and reliant on this platform, the system of record. We have to make sure our data is reproducible and we can get at it when we need it, if we need it. And then IBM I 7.3 is the most popular version of the operating system today, while dial back 6 years ago and think about that and what's changed in that regards. The attrition rate is very low on the platform. It's about 1.4% is what we actually see, which is pretty normal when you think about Timothy's comments about acquisitions and those kinds of things. And we still continue to have a platform with a great return on its investment. And here at HelpSystems, we're solid on the platform. We love the platform. We continue to support it, and we hope that you do too. We can help you with many of your IT problems around systems management. Give us a call. Join us on some of our other webinars throughout the year. We are very much so here to help you out. And as we wrap up today, our final polling question is exactly on that topic. How can we help you out with some of your IT initiatives, whether it's related to security, high availability, managing the documents and reports around IBM I. We help customers out with that, or automating the server to help with that skill gap that you have so that you can have people doing other things other than manning the computer, monitoring it, and doing things manual. And of course, programmer productivity tools. Think about RDI, think about RPG free, things like that. We can help you out with that as we move forward. So we did have a few polling questions, so we'll leave that few questions in the Q&A. And let me see if I can bring up those questions here for you. All right. So customers out there just making more of a comment that it's tough to stay current because of the number of partitions that they have out there. And security is kind of maybe forcing that issue to keeping current. Their point is, do you think keeping current matters for security? Anybody willing to answer that question? I guess not.
I'll take a stab at it, but I'm the least qualified.
Yeah.
I mean, staying on a currently supported release is important.
Yeah.
Drifting off a release that doesn't have security patches and PTFs, that's not very smart. So it's that simple.
And some of the most valuable features of the 7.3 and 7.4 release are in the area of security and really understanding, who's using your applications and at what level. So I would say, yeah, you definitely want to keep at a later release for security purposes, but also to take advantage of some of these new functions that we're adding to the system today.
Right. And then we'll take one last question. I think it's an important one. They're asking for some number. How many new clients are moving to IBM I? And then really it's more about what industries are growing around IBM I. Maybe Alison, you'd want to take a stab at that.
Yeah. So it's interesting, and we get asked a lot about the number of new clients onto IBM I. I would say we have a lot of growth in our emerging markets. So in Latin America, in Asia, in China, for example, huge banking growth in China, and through some of the countries in Africa. We see a lot of growth in those non-traditional markets that we have. It's interesting when we have our established markets in North America and Europe. Our established markets are exactly that, established. Most companies in North America and Europe have systems today. Now, where we are seeing movement is from things like we actually have some of our low-sized System Z clients that consider moving to IBM I as they are growing and so on, because our platform also will do some of the things that Z does. I like to think we do it better, but that my Z counterparts would tell you otherwise. However, my point is that oftentimes software charges and so on are a lot less expensive on an I platform. And so a lot of our Z low-hanging customers will move down to I. So we're seeing a lot of migration. Now, in terms of applications, I think we've talked a little bit about it. Where we're seeing tremendous growth is in areas like that require high data security. So we see things like banking, finance, insurance, healthcare. These are the very actively growing segments. Now, having said that, obviously we're growing year to year. We've had incredible business results since the fourth quarter of 2017. We have seen tremendous growth and an upward curve for IBM I revenue, which means that we are growing clients, growing their footprints, and this is all good news. So we're growing across the board.
That's awesome. Well, I want to thank U.S. customers and business partners showing up today on behalf of HelpSystems. I want to thank our panelists today, Alison Butterill. Always great to hear you share your insight from IBM. Brandon, welcome to the program. Great to have you as the IBM I marketing manager this year in 2020. Thanks for joining. And then Ian, as always, good luck to you and your lab services team in 2020. And Tim, I look forward to the many articles that IT Jungle puts out around IBM I, the Power Server, and really bring a lot of great thought leadership to this marketplace. Thank you all for joining me today.
You're most welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a
Thanks,
wonderful year. Bye-bye.